This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Mateli Edwards. Tonight's top stories from East Asia. On the eve of the second impeachment vote against South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol, the main opposition leader Lee Jae-myung stresses that removing him is the only way to restore order. Now, a Taiwanese lawmaker says that China's military exercises and power projection are now the new normal and urges regional nations to bolster their defense capabilities. China held a solemn memorial in Nanjing commemorating the victims of the 1937 massacre, which occurred after Japanese troops captured the city. And Chinese stocks take a hit after investors seem to feel a key policy meeting that promised to boost consumption failed to deliver clear details on a fiscal stimulus package. Still ahead on East Asia tonight, Chinese scientists are rushing to climate-proof crops as increasingly warmer temperatures threaten to drastically cut yields. What's the impact on food security if the issue is left unaddressed? Well, we speak with an expert. South Korea's main opposition leader, Lee Jae-myung, says that the best way to restore order in the country is to impeach President Yoon Suk-yeol. Well, his remarks come ahead of a second impeachment vote on Saturday. The previous attempt failed after most of the ruling People Power Party, or PPP, boycotted the vote.
여러분이 지켜야 할 것은 윤석열도 국민의힘도 아닙니다. 바로 추운 거리에서 지금 울부짖고 계시는 국민들, 그리고 바로 그들의 삶입니다. 어제의 선전포고를 통해 확인됐습니다. 탄핵만이 혼란을 종식시킬 가장 빠르고 확실한 방법입니다.
Well, the tide appears to be turning from within Mr. Yoon's party. Since the first impeachment attempt failed, at least 7 ruling party members have publicly supported a vote to impeach the president. Now, that is just one short of the 8 votes the opposition needs to reach the 2/3 majority required for the move. And for more on this, we are joined by CNA's Lim Yun-suk, live from Seoul. So, Yun-suk, in a nutshell, what can we expect from the second impeachment vote tomorrow?
Well, first of all, the timing for that session has now been brought forward 1 hour to 4 p.m. local time from 5 p.m. Now, the National Assembly Speaker, Woo Won-sik, said that because more time was needed for discussions, he said he had to bring it forward because this was an issue of national significance. Now, this second motion now also includes allegations that martial law troops and police tried to arrest lawmakers under the leadership of President Yoon Suk-yeol, and it reinforces the logic that this martial law was an unconstitutional and illegal act. Now, the opposition party members are hoping that more ruling party members will vote to impeach him, since the majority of them did boycott the first session, motion last Saturday. Now, the new floor leader of the ruling People Party, Kwon Son-dong, has not yet said what the party official line is, though Kwon Son-dong is a key confidant of President Yoon, and he did tell reporters on Friday that at the moment the official party line was to oppose the bill. But having said that, he also said that a party meeting will be held tomorrow morning, on Saturday morning, to gather the opinions of all the 100 members of the ruling party. And also, he said, what was more important right now was not the impeachment bill itself, but what happens after Saturday, because the impeachment does not mean the end of this current turmoil here in South Korea. And he said that he would do his best to resolve this national crisis within the party and be prepared for all situations after that crucial Saturday vote.
Well, Yun-suk, in the meantime, what are the domestic and diplomatic fallouts from this political crisis?
Well, it is huge here in South Korea, domestically, yes, but also in its foreign relations. Now, Foreign Minister Cho Tae-yeol told lawmakers on Friday that there have been serious damage to South Korea's diplomatic position because of what was happening here in South Korea. And he believes that there will be more repercussions and will really undo many of the achievements that South Korea have had in recent years. Now, several foreign diplomats and officials that I spoke to did say that they were watching the situation very closely, though they had trust in South Korea and they believe that South Korea would be able to overcome this crisis. And also, there are some meetings among South Korea's allies that are still ongoing despite this turmoil here in South Korea. And many experts are saying that, this came at a crucial, very important time for South Korea as he was making preparations for U.S. President-elect Donald Trump to take office next year. And it really, especially when it comes to the issues of the payment for the U.S. troops based here in South Korea and their relations with North Korea. And in fact, there are mounting concerns over the security as no one seems to know who is in power right now. From what we heard from President Yoon Suk-yeol so far, he doesn't seem to have any intention to resign, which means he remains in power, and especially means that he is still the military commander-in-chief. And so, if there were provocations by North Korea, he would be the one who would have to give orders to the South Korean military. But the military here has voiced concerns also about this, especially since the country doesn't even have a defense minister now, because the foreign defense minister, Kim Yong-hyun, is now behind bars for having recommended the martial law to President Yoon.
Well, thanks so very much. CNA's Lim Yun-suk live from Seoul. Now, and for more insights into the political turmoil in South Korea, we are joined by MJ Moon, distinguished professor at Yonsei University. Well, thanks so very much, Professor, for joining us this Friday evening. So President Yoon's second impeachment looms. In these critical final hours, I'm curious to know, Professor, if you think there is any maneuvering left, any behind-the-scenes deals or negotiations that's still in play.
Well, who knows? Probably there are some negotiation and talks behind the curtain, but it's the D-Day is coming. We don't have many hours left. So as a reporter mentioned that tomorrow the impeachment day, and I think the impeachment decision will be made. So the opposition party side, they only need 8 votes from the governing party, and then 7 lawmakers from ruling party already publicly announced for their support for impeachment. So that I think it's expected that more than 8 will vote for impeachment from the ruling party at this time.
Well, we can see cracks, within the ruling People Power Party. It is deepening. But there are some that say that, there is still a core group that's loyal to President Yoon. But how far do you think loyalty can stretch under this current mounting pressure?
Yeah, factional infighting is there, as you mentioned. And I think the majority of the ruling party lawmakers still support for President Yoon, not for the what happened, but I think they really care for their political power future. So that here, Mr. Han, who is a party leader, and the lawmakers who support Mr. Han, I think because Mr. Han already publicly mentioned that President Yoon is not. Shouldn't be stay in the presidency any longer because he cannot fulfill public duties. So there are more than 8, I think, who knows how many, but I think enough number of lawmakers will support for impeachment this time.
Right, because, the last time it didn't happen, and, there was talk that there is a real fear among PPP members that South Korea's opposition leader, Lee Jae-myung, will become president if Yoon is removed, and there is still that fear there among the PPP. Is that true?
Yeah, I think, from the governing party side, I think that's a fear, but I think we should look at the democracy and constitutional values first. So I think that's the way the opposition party actually tried to persuade the ruling party members to join the impeachment plenary tomorrow and support for the impeachment.
So if President Yoon is removed, do you think that the ruling PPP, they can recover from this whole martial law controversy and they can also weather the snap elections that everyone is saying could happen next year?
Well, I think it will take time to recover the damage. Of course, the governing party, they try to minimize the negative impact on their party support line, but I think it will take time. So depending on when the new presidential election occur, and so that we should follow the political cycle, so that once impeachment passed through the parliament, then it goes to the constitutional court, and then the constitutional court will decide whether President Yoon stays or ousted. So that takes time. So depending on when the new election comes, because the opposition party leader, Mr. Lee Jae-myung, he has several trials, so that might be an issue.
So, Professor, I mean, the burning question on everybody's mind is who is really running South Korea now amidst all this political chaos and no defense minister as well?
Right. That's why opposition parties side actually they really try to terminate the uncertain status at this point, so that to them, well, the impeachment is the only way to really make things clear, and then they can start and turn on the new page.
All right. I want to touch on this because, we know that South Korea, your tourism, your retail sectors are already feeling the strain from what's going on.
Right.
So what do you think is going to be the biggest impact on South Korean society if this turmoil continues to escalate?
Well, the political turmoil and uncertainty really creates a lot of political, economic, and social burden at this point. So that's why we really try to turn to the next page. I think economic impact is quite clear and vivid at this point, and also a lot of people concerned about the security issues as well. So that's the reason why a lot of people support for impeachment and try to change the current situation.
All right, thank you so very much for your insights, M. Jae-moon, distinguished professor at Yonsei University. Well, we're going to go for a short break now, but coming up next on East Asia Tonight, more on the impact of South Korea's political turmoil. Markets close to recouping its losses from that brief martial law declaration, as major credit ratings assess the country's financial standing is actually stable. The Greater China markets tumbled today after Beijing's policy pledges appeared to fall short of expectations. Hello again. Good to have you with us on East Asia Tonight. It is now time for your business news with Roland Lim. And it seems like investors, they aren't exactly too impressed with Beijing's policy pledges out of that annual Central Economic Work Conference.
Yes, it does seem to have missed the market expectations. Greater China markets all ended in the red, with losses exceeding more than 2%, marking their worst day in about 3 weeks. The statement out of that key economic agenda-setting meeting repeated promises of looser monetary policy, a greater tolerance for a larger fiscal deficit, and more government borrowing. But analysts say it appears to be lacking in specifics. Now, to delve into the lack of specifics, CNA's Tan Se-hui joins us live from Beijing. Se-hui, very good evening. Now, many commentaries out there seem to suggest that they still lack implementation specifics. But the analysts you spoke to earlier, they're telling you that there's more than meets the eye. Tell us more.
Oh, that's right. I mean, generally, the Central Economic Work Conference does not spell out specifics. It's more of giving a direction of the economic priorities of the new year. But as I spoke with analysts, they say that the tone of this Economic Work Conference is a lot more different from previous years. As recent as just 2 years ago, they say that the tone is a lot more stronger. They're using stronger language. They've also given more specifics in terms of the direction. So they've said that they will increase budget deficits. They will also say that they are introducing interest rate cuts. And so it is a strong indication that the Chinese government wants to commit to boosting the Chinese economy. So I've spoken to these analysts, and I will show you the story that we put together for you. As Chinese leaders met to set key tasks for 2025 at the annual Central Economic Work Conference, a 4,000-word brief released at the conclusion of the meeting reads almost like a battle cry, with officials at all levels urged to face up to difficulties and strengthen their confidence.
Really reviving a lot of the crisis era language that we haven't seen in more than a decade since the global financial crisis, and the economic issues that have been plaguing them, ranging from property market to consumers being down, and also certain youth unemployment issues. There seems to be identification that these issues really require a lot more from the Chinese state, and hence the statement came through with a more decisive tone on actually assisting the Chinese economy and to from the state, and really to let the state support a lot of that growth.
Boosting domestic demand, especially household consumption, is the #1 task for next year, replacing technological innovation.
Quite remarkably is that the government leaders are putting consumer demand at the top of the agenda. At 2023 meeting, the top priority used to be critical technologies, what we call the new productive forces. But this time it went to the second place. Instead, references to consumer demand, to a more efficient investment, is the top priority.
The Central Economic Work Conference decisions built on the outcome of a December 9 meeting of the 24-member Politburo, also chaired by President Xi Jinping, while urging officials to work towards stabilizing the property and stock markets, among other key tasks. Leaders pledged to deploy more proactive fiscal policies and a moderately loose monetary policy, a term last used more than a decade ago during the global financial crisis in 2008. But the new policy stance will have to confront a very different external environment this time around.
When leaders talk about moderately loosening the monetary policy, they sort of realize that the situation is quite challenging. This time, China is facing stronger constraints from the exchange rates because there's the extra pressure of Trump tariffs, which is normally conducive to depreciation in the RMB. And I do think that the need to keep the RMB relatively stable will limit the actual extent of monetary loosening.
Different from 2023, this year's Economic Work Conference also includes lines emphasizing the importance of safeguarding people's livelihoods and maintaining safety and stability during the year-end and New Year period. It required officials to thoroughly investigate and resolve various conflicts, disputes, and potential risk to ensure overall social stability. All in all, analysts said the meeting's outcome indicates a clear-eyed assessment of the economic situation facing the country.
This seems to be a shift in mindset, and the hopes are that the wording that comes out that suggests that they are actually looking at it as a crisis puts Chinese officials from top to bottom in a more serious mindset that this requires decisive action and actually follow through with those actions. And I think that would be only beneficial for the Chinese economy in 2025.
Now that the Economic Work Conference has ended, the outcome of that conference will help guide officials when it comes to setting the new economic growth target for the new year. Now, that economic growth target, that figure will be very closely watched as it will be unveiled in the 2 sessions that will be held next year in March, and that's when officials will come together to discuss as well as approve government budgets.
So the shift in mindset by policymakers, as suggested by the Moody's economist you interviewed earlier, that comes amid some unusual chatter and movements in the economic and business circles in China. Am I hearing this right?
Yeah, you're hearing that right. Unusual chatter indeed, because there were these two prominent economists that have made some comments that went viral last week. Now, let me pull up one of these comments. One of them is made by Gao Shanwen. He had said during a live stream that went viral, he said that China's post-pandemic society has become full of vibrant old people, lifeless young people, and despairing middle-aged people. So that was kind of despairing, his comments, and he was referring to young households curtailing consumption due to low wages as well as a weak labor market, and also middle-aged households suffering from layoffs and economic uncertainties, while the older households are enjoying greater and healthier financial stability. Analysts I spoke with say they can't say whether these claims are true or false because there is a lack of data. Nevertheless, he says that just coming from the Economic Work Conference, they show that the government is sitting up, they're listening, because these seem to echo some sentiments on the ground, and they have addressed some of these concerns through boosting, saying that they would boost consumption and that they would address the unemployment figures. At the same time, it shows that these leaders are not completely ignoring these sentiments. Now, at the same time, separately, another rare op-ed by Tencent boss Pony Ma. He is a prominent billionaire. The re-emergence of these prominent billionaires, he said and praised the government in that op-ed, saying that there's strong determination by the Chinese government for pushing economic recovery. And analysts believe that the re-emergence of these billionaires show that the government has realized that a whole of society approach is necessary, crucially the private sector. And it also might signify that regulatory crackdowns on private sectors may be on hold, especially given the looming external challenges, particularly from the US.
So Hui, appreciate those insights and analysis. CNA's Tan Se-Hui reporting live from Beijing. Major ratings agencies have assessed South Korea's credit score as stable despite the ongoing political turmoil. Finance Minister Choi Sung-mok had held separate conference calls with S&P Global, Moody's Ratings and Fitch Ratings, where he assured them that all institutions in the country were working normally and that previous presidential impeachments had limited impact on the country's economic activity. The Finance Ministry says that all three appraisers shared a common view on South Korea's stability. Now, S&P noted that follow-up measures by financial authorities reflected the steadiness of the nation's market system. Moody's mentioned that the government's proactive communication with global investors would positively influence South Korea's credit rating. Fitch said that the recent political turmoil does not pose a threat to the country's rating and praised authorities' transparent efforts to explain the situation. South Korea's Finance Ministry and Central Bank have been holding daily meetings to discuss ways to minimize the economic fallout from President Yoon Suk-yeol's short-lived martial law declaration. Finance Minister Choi reiterated at today's gathering that the ministry is ready to take additional stabilizing measures in the event of excessive market volatility. In its December Green Book economic report, the government has flagged that the economy is facing downside risks due to uncertainty at home and abroad. Now, the language used stood to contrast to last month's assessment of a, quote, gradual recovery. And South Korean stocks ended the day higher, extending gains for the fourth straight session and erasing most of its losses after the martial law declaration. The Kospi benchmark index briefly traded above its close on the 3rd of December when President Yoon made that late-night emergency order, but gave back all these gains to slightly below that level. The small-cap Kosdaq that finished 1.5% in the green above the level seen before the martial law decree. US dollar against the Korean won is currently weaker by 0.28%, 1,434 to the dollar. And that's it for business. Oteli, back to you.
Thanks so very much, Roland. Time now for another break, but coming up on East Asia tonight, what is fueling protesters braving freezing temperatures to rally against the South Korean president? You're watching East Asia tonight. Chinese stocks took a hit in today's trading after a key policy meeting that promised to boost consumption failed to deliver clear details on a fiscal stimulus package. Taiwan says that China's recent large-scale build-up of naval forces around the island is testament to an evolving threat from the mainland. And South Korea's main opposition leader, Lee Jae-myung, stresses that removing President Yoon Suk-yeol is the only way to restore order. Earlier, my colleagues Arnold Gay and Julie Yu spoke with Carl Friedhoff from the Chicago Council on Global Affairs, and they began by asking him about the likelihood of the impeachment vote succeeding tomorrow.
The first impeachment vote, obviously that was a much more close-run thing where we kind of expected that the PPP was not going to participate. But after President Yoon's speech, kind of the confusion about who was actually in charge of the country, for a while, the prime minister and the leader of the PPP said that they were going to kind of get together and manage state affairs. That didn't really seem to hold. And now the president has come out and said that he is fully in charge, continues to try to appoint a new defense minister. He's made some other appointments and accepted some other resignations. And so clearly he is in control. After his speech, it seems that the PPP is now going to turn on him. Although we currently have 7 defections that are announced, we need to get to 8 and then thus 200. We'll see if that happens. It's a real tense time, I think, in South Korea.
Carl, I mean, President Yoon, trying to make it appear it's business as usual, but it seems the choices for him are bad or worse, resign or be impeached. And he claims he will boldly confront them. But does the president's swerve, which we saw, from contrition to defiance yesterday, suggest he's looking for another option? Are prosecutors and his critics open to the idea of an alternative apart from the first 2 I mentioned?
From what I've seen, there is no alternative, and his critics and the prosecution are not open to that. You have to remember when he took over the prosecution under Moon Jae-in, there was a division in the prosecutorial what they were seeking to do in terms of they could prosecute and arrest, and those were then divided. 3 of the candidates for that position said they would not accept that. Yoon, however, said he would accept that, and I think there's a lot of resentment within the prosecution, and that's why we've seen them go so quickly after Yoon. Not only that, but they also know how to read the political winds in South Korea, and those political winds are clearly blowing towards either impeachment or a quick resignation. And now almost certainly it's going to be impeachment since the president has said he will not resign. So no, I don't think there's any third way out of this, that it's going to be impeachment or nothing at this point.
Carl, before we let you go, if the impeachment motion does succeed, could you just talk to us about the practicalities of what might happen next?
So what will happen next is it will then go to the Constitutional Court. There is some confusion there because there are currently only 6 justices. It's unclear if they need 6 or 7 out of the full 9 to actually hear this. But even if they do get ready to hear that, that's going to take several months to happen. We wouldn't expect a verdict out of them to officially or restore President Yoon for 3 or 4 months. If they do opt to remove him and say that his impeachment is constitutional and he is officially removed from power, then we would see an election within 60 days. So if you're looking out at when that election might take place, the most likely time is looking like May or June.
South Koreans, meantime, are continuing to express their solidarity with protesters who are rallying outdoors to impeach President Yoon by sending them free food and coffee. Well, it's a phenomenon we've also spoken about earlier this week on East Asia Tonight. People across the country have been using delivery apps to pay for food and beverages at cafes and restaurants near Seoul's National Assembly. The details are shared on social media, allowing demonstrators braving the freezing temperatures to have a free drink or snack delivered to them. Well, the owner of a cafe near the parliament says that orders have dramatically surged.
이번이 처음인 것 같아요. 그리고 저 또한 이곳에서 지금 19년 동안 운영을 하고 있는데요. 굉장히 그 규모도 크고 그리고 또 이렇게 한 분이 아니라 꼭 릴레이 하듯이 좋은 일 선행을 릴레이 하듯이 지금 많은 분들이 전화를 주고 계십니다.
솔직히 좀 정치가 지금 얼어 있는 것 같은데 그 시민의 마음을 따뜻하게 녹여주는 것 같아요. 그래서 솔직히 이렇게까지 마음을 써주시는구나. 이 자리를 나오길 잘했다. 그런 생각이 들었습니다.
South Korean author Han Kang, this year's Nobel Prize laureate in literature, has weighed in on the political turmoil. Speaking yesterday at an event in Stockholm after receiving her Nobel Award, Ms. Han said that the situation after President Yoon's short-lived martial law declaration was not as bad as it appeared to the outside, praising the sincerity and courage shown by South Koreans in response to the crisis. She said that many who had taken to the streets were of her generation or even older who had memories of the 1980 Gwangju uprising, adding that people had acted out of concern and a sense of urgency, knowing how much worse it could get if the situation was left unchecked. A Taiwanese lawmaker says that China's large-scale military exercises and power projection are the new normal as he urges regional countries to ramp up their own defense in deterrence.
我很清晰地认为这是常态化的一个中期阶段，他们都可以随时随地，然后把这样子演习的侵扰的状况来去扩大。那我认为这已经是常态化的开始。周遭的国家也要很清楚的知道说，如果他们没有相应的应对的话，他们本身也可能成为威胁的下一个对象。我是建议也不是只是看而已，或者只是观察关心，而是必须提高自己本身的防卫。
Beijing has broken its silence after days of military activities around Taiwan, saying that it's up to China itself to decide whether or not to hold drills and that the military will not be absent in fighting against separatist forces.
维护国家主权和领土完整，维护中华民族根本利益，维护两岸同胞共同利益，是人民解放军的神圣职责。兵无常势，水无常形。 是否举行演习、何时举行演习，由我们根据自身需要和斗争形势自主决定。无论是否举行演习，解放军在打毒促统方面不会缺席，不会手软。任何以外谋独、以武谋独行径，都必遭严惩，注定失败。
The latest Chinese military activities near Taiwan are Beijing's biggest ever, stretching from the southern islands of Japan to the South China Sea. Taiwan warns that this recent buildup of naval forces is testament to an evolving threat from the mainland. China commemorated victims of the Nanjing Massacre, holding a ceremony in the eastern China city where the mass killings took place in the weeks after Japanese troops captured the city in 1937. The national flag at the square next to the Memorial Hall was raised at 8 o'clock this morning and flown at half-mast. A siren blared 2 hours later. Personnel present at the ceremony marked a moment of silence. Elsewhere, the traffic came to a halt, with drivers stopping their vehicles to sound their horns. Pedestrians also paused to mark the occasion. A declaration of peace was then read by representatives, and doves, symbolizing their hope for peace, were released. 87 years on, the scale of the killings of both civilians and soldiers by Japanese troops remains a subject of deep contention. China claims the Japanese army slaughtered more than 300,000 people. Japanese historians, however, have a much lower figure that ranged from the tens of thousands to some 200,000. Well, ahead of the anniversary, Tokyo had asked Beijing to ensure the safety of Japanese nationals in China. That's according to Kyodo News, citing sources within the Japanese government. The request followed stabbing incidents earlier this year in Suzhou and in Shenzhen. Coming up on East Asia tonight, Chinese scientists rush to climate-proof their crops. We speak with an expert on what it takes to ensure food security. Researchers in China have found that growing potatoes at just 3 degrees Celsius higher than usual could more than halve the size of the vegetable. Their findings, they say, are a warning sign of the future of food security. The International Potato Center in Beijing grew their potato crop at 3 degrees Celsius above the current average. Well, that's the level of warming the UN has predicted for the world by the year 2100. Well, tuber growth sped up, but at harvest time, the potatoes were unusually small, and the smallest was the size of a quail's egg. The research team says the yield was cut by more than half, and they are worried about what this means for food supplies.
我觉得是令人担忧的，因为温度的变化，我现在的这个设定是3度，平均温度3度的变化，它对产量的影响，是极显著的。 所以说，它会显著地降低当前品种的产量。
China is the world's biggest producer of potatoes. The vegetable is crucial to global food security, but they are vulnerable to heat. Climate change is pushing temperatures up, and with this, new diseases have started to appear. Farmers in China are already struggling with drought and heavy rain.
11号开始栽的，栽了2天，11号、12号。 到13号的时候就下雨了，连着下了2天雨，2天2宿没停啊。在俺们这一开始苗供不上，这回一下子就运来这么多苗，完就连着下了2天雨。这2天雨就啥也干不了。完今天本来呢想那个种呢，上午也是小雨不断，一上午完了地可湿的，下不去地，下午就不行了，栽不了了。
For more insights, we are joined now by Associate Professor Matthew Tan from the Engineering Cluster at the Singapore Institute of Technology. Well, warm welcome to East Asia tonight, Prof. So we know that China produces over 100 million tons of potatoes annually. It is the world's largest producer. But there's projections of, was it like a 3 degrees Celsius a temperature increase, that possibly cutting yields in half. So in other words, would you say that it is very urgent to address this threat to global food security?
Yeah. So thanks for having me, on the stage today. I just want to say this problem is just not unique to China. I was recently speaking to the farmers in Latin America, and they grow blueberries there. And in the highland, they have now experienced a 1.5 degrees increase in the highland. And the resulting harvest was they have harvested only at 60% yield as compared to the last previous years. So this climate change, the 3 degree difference, it will definitely have a very significant impact, not just on potato yield, it will have a significant impact on agricultural farmers worldwide.
Yeah. So, well, thanks for sharing that. 1.5 degrees in the highlands, they're already seeing that. But when it comes to, climate proofing the food crops, right, especially in these regions, they're vulnerable to climate extremes. What would you say is the primary obstacle?
The primary obstacles in this industry is really the access to technology. Now, in the field of agri-tech, we do have a technology such as selective genetic breeding, where we look, for thermal tolerance genes in plants, in animals. And this is not genetic modification, this is selective genetic breeding. And it is possible. They must have access to the use of technology. And we've done this already for greenhouse, in aquaculture. The other methodology to move towards it is to try to move it indoor. But unfortunately, if you look at the size of the field, like in China, it's just too huge. So we must ensure that small farmers, women's farmers, they must all have access to technology such as selective genetic breeding.
So you mentioned, access to technology being one of the reasons, being one of the main obstacles. And what sort of steps, though, can policymakers take, for instance, the farmers? What can they do to have to gain access to that? And what sort of strategies should be scaled up to safeguard food security?
Now, to the best of my understanding in my work with APEC, we are trying to harmonize the standards on the use of technology. And that is definitely very important, especially for small farmers. They must congregate. They need the support of the government. The government policy in congregating small farmers. Now, as we all know, small farmers account for 80% of the total farmer population in the world. And the use of policy, the change of policy, for the support for the private sector from the government is actually important. And I know for once within the APEC ecosystem where we have 21 economies, we are now in the process of making, the policy, friendly and favorable, especially to farmers and to the access to technology and the access to funding.
So you mentioned that, small farmers make up 80%, right, of farms out there. So can you share with us, what are some of the countries, they have come up with policies or strategies that have effectively included and helped these small-scale farmers?
Singapore would be one good example. The Singapore Food Agency has put together the Ag Fund, and they are actually encouraging farmers to upgrade. They're encouraging farmers to upgrade to the use of technology, climate challenges, technology that can help them improve in their farming methodology. So I see Singapore as one of the forerunner, with the Singapore Food Agency putting in a lot of grants and friendly policies, and even with the lease of the land. If you look at like in Lim Chu Kang, many of the farmers, they've been given preferential rates when it comes to renewing the lease for the farm. Now, I also do know for a fact that many governments in Asia, they are doing their best. They're trying to put a policy, to make it as friendly as possible for especially the small farmers. And it takes a concerted effort. And I really think in order for food security to be totally secured, we will need to have public-private partnership.
So I know Singapore, for one, is one example where they are promoting, aeroponics and vertical farming, especially in land-scarce countries. I'm also curious to know what potential does it hold for boosting crop resilience as well as yields?
Now, if you want to go into crop resilient yield, good harvest, we must first of all accept that the climate is just going to get warmer and warmer. I can give the example in the previous farm that I used to work with in China, and where I was a CTO. Usually in the first week of October, the temperature would have dropped, to anything between 24 to 23. But in the first week of October this year, the temperature actually hit 31 degrees. So the farmers must now accept that global warming, it's not some fad, it's not some, things that is not real. Global warming is here to stay. And farmers will need to realize that if they need to embrace the change. Now, the thing that we need to look out for is, when you talk about vertical farming, as you mentioned earlier on, Singapore had a number of vertical farms, but they were all hit when the energy costs started rising, from 20 cents to 30 cents, and today it's like 45, 60 cents. There must be a balance as to, the energy cost and the use of technology as to how we can encourage our farmers to build resilient crops and harvest. And I think it's important that they must do financial modeling, be it herbs that they're growing or leafy vegetables. A lot of farmers actually go into farming and they invest into technology without doing proper financial modeling.
That's right, and global warming is definitely real. Thanks so much for highlighting that to us. Associate Professor Matthew Tan there from the engineering cluster at the Singapore Institute of Technology. In other news, Indian teenager Gukesh Damaraju has become the youngest ever world chess champion. The 18-year-old grandmaster clinched the sport's most prestigious title after defeating fellow grandmaster Ding Liren from China at the FIDE World Chess Championship in Singapore. And this was the moment his Chinese opponent resigned. after making a mistake in a game that had been expected to end in a draw. The teenager's fans erupted into cheers, many of whom flew in from India just to support him. Gukesh then burst into tears. He's overcome with emotion at the enormity of the moment. He has indeed shattered the age record held by chess legend Garry Kasparov, who was 22 when he became world champion. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi was among the first to congratulate Gukesh. The Chennai-born chess prodigy is just the second world champion from India. Gukesh appeared destined for success when he became one of the world's youngest grandmasters at just 12 years old.
My journey, it's been, since the time I started playing chess, like 6.5, 7, I've been dreaming about this, about living this moment for more than 10 years. And every chess player wants to experience this moment, and very few get the chance.
Looks like global TV hit Squid Game is returning for a second season, and Netflix is pulling out all the stops to promote its biggest show of all time.
All right, you're ready?
The streaming giant held an immersive premiere in Los Angeles, where hundreds of fans turned up in the show's green tracksuits and, in the spirit of the series, had to battle it out to win tickets to the screening. Before the games, the stars of the show graced the red carpet and gave a sneak peek into the hotly anticipated second season.
There will be more main characters, and also I can show the frontman's backstories, and I'm on the show without my mask finally.
Well, I was so worried about about the second season, because there's a saying in Korea, like a second season never tops the first one. So, but now I see all those fans and the love, support from the fans, and feel like season 2 is already very successful.
The Korean series follows cash-strapped contestants who compete in deadly games for a chance to win a fortune. Well, the show is rich in political commentary, and the makers believe that the ongoing turmoil in South Korea will only make the viewing even more meaningful. Well, Squid Game 2 premieres on the 26th of December, Boxing Day. All right, that pretty much wraps up East Asia Tonight this Friday. Your headlines, don't forget, you can get it anytime at cna.asia. You can always find us on Facebook and YouTube. Well, have a wonderful weekend. Thanks for watching.